everyone, Gaijin Goomba here. Now, before we get started talking about the intricacies of anime in the mainstream, I have to quickly make mention that this video was sponsored by Xseed published third-person splasher Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash.
Because, well, we're gonna be discussing some of the more fan-servicey aspects of anime, so we seriously doubt this video is gonna stay fully monetized. But thanks to Xseed support, we really don't have to worry about that issue. Now, similar to other Senran Kagura titles, Peach Beach Splash has all the same over-the-top action and anime girls, but instead of going hand-to-hand combat, now the girls are running around blasting the crap out of each other with high-powered water weaponry, which you can play offline or in multiple modes online with 5v5 team battles or survival matches. And not only does each shinobi gal and weapon have their own unique traits, but the game introduces over 800 attribute cards to modify your gameplay, such as buffs or summonable allies. And with the latest update, you can even play the game in VR if you have a PSVR headset, and boy, I can't even imagine all the possibilities with that.
Just be careful not to completely lose yourself in that experience. I know a few of you might be thinking, oh Gaijin, there you go shilling again, but honestly, with the release of Peach Beach Splash capping off a long history of US releases in the Senran Kagura franchise, I began to wonder a question that many gaming and anime YouTubers alike have been discussing for years now. Can anime hit the mainstream, or has it hit the mainstream already?
For obvious reasons, Senran Kagura is a franchise that surprised us with a long list of Western releases over the last couple of years, releasing games on the PS4, PS Vita, and even the 3DS. And that was the last place we expected a series like Senran to end up, a Nintendo platform. But not only is the franchise still creating new entries like Renewal releasing in Japan this February, but it's surprising that the series is still selling well enough stateside that those new entries are still making their way over.
Exactly, and this really made me think, has anime culture come to a point where it's finally starting to hit the mainstream? Or an even bigger question, has it already been for some time now? Some in the anime community say yes, while others have said no. Now, I remember back in my college days, my senior thesis for my degree in international relations was how the popularization of manga familiarized Western readers with things like name suffixes and the concept of reading from right to left. Which to me gave me the impression that anime culture had already begun to hit the mainstream. Yet it seems like at least once a year the general public gets upset at one or more anime-ism that I'd figure people would have gotten over by now considering the subculture where it comes from. Regardless of opinion, I think one big factor that we may be overlooking is just what exactly is mainstream. We toss that term around a lot, but what exactly does it mean? Are we talking public media or general popular consensus? Even then, are we talking about TV, movies, books, and even then there's the internet, which is its own different beast. You see what I mean? It's because of this weird separation of what mainstream means that I think the answer to has anime made it into the mainstream is actually completely dependent on what we consider mainstream. For a while in the late 90s and early 2000s, it seemed like anime was starting to head that way as anime references made their way into mainstream kids' shows or even entire programs built upon anime-isms. But a large part of the time, these references only alluded to a very small handful of anime or anime genres.
For example, when Dragon Ball Z was really hot in the West, traditional Western kid shows like Kids Next Door and Billy and Mandy would draw references from DBZ, but not much more than that. We had some other shows like Megas XLR that tried to replicate some of the anime-isms of the time, like giant robot fighting, but it only went so far. In fact, only a handful of Western shows would live on in discussion as possibly being anime, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but as time has gone on, we see less and less of that happening.
You don't deserve this big Toblerone.
Okay, less of it doing well.
But this isn't to say that I think anime hasn't really hit the mainstream, because if you factor in the internet as mainstream, oh yeah, we're already there. Easy to say, internet memes are the driving force of familiarizing anime within the community at large. So much so that as soon as something meme-worthy comes out of Japan, the world of the net is quick to catch on to either replicate it or adapt it into mainstream internet culture. Seriously, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure alone is evidence enough to prove just how mainstream anime culture is becoming on the internet.
Nice, mercy down, mercy down, mercy down. JoJo!
And with the rise of many Anitubers with the YouTube community, many people would say that the popularity and understanding of anime culture is pushing its way into the mainstream. Even excluding those memes and internet videos, anime is still thriving strong in the mainstream internet community. Streaming services like Crunchyroll has made public access to anime old and new easier than ever before, and because of that access, people curious of the medium of anime have only a few clicks stopping them from watching it and sharing it with hundreds if not thousands of people online. With this substantial growth of popularity when it comes to anime and mainstream internet culture, the answer of yes seems like a no-brainer when it comes to this question.
Also, have you noticed in larger populated cities that even Japanese bookstores like Kinokuniya, which sell tons and tons of manga and anime related material, are becoming popular enough as public shops that they're not only sustaining themselves, but growing?
So you'd think with all this evidence surrounding us, referentials in Western shows, the massive impact of anime within the internet community, and the growing interest in Japanese stores selling anime paraphernalia, that anime really has hit the mainstream, right? Well, honestly, I think there are two very large things that are still holding and will likely hold back anime for a long period of time from truly hitting US national appeal.
Boing, boing, boing. Boing, boing, boing.
We can deny it up and down until the cows come home, guys, but the fact of the matter is, with only a few exceptions, anime is very, very focused on fan service and bodily humor. And in all honesty, I find that a great deal of what makes anime culture what it is also fairly dependent on sexual humor and fan service. Think about all the shows for kids that came from Japan overseas to us, and how many of them had to at one point in time be bodily censored. Pokemon comes to mind, and that show's dominated and continues to dominate generations. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to tone down female monster designs multiple times. One Piece, one of the most dominating anime for kids and young adults, yeah, there's definitely a few things that would have to get toned down. Even in the modern day, people in mass were complaining about hypersexualization in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with Dahlia aka Tsuki. And this was a game, again, aimed at young adults and teens, and the backlash was massive.
Now, obviously we don't have a problem with it so long as it's not dipping into unlawful territory. Heck, we wouldn't have taken on Xseed's sponsorship of Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash if we were. Which, again, if you want a goofy third-person shooter game with bouncy anime girls, PBS is right up your alley. But considering where we come from as US citizens, I wonder if we're ever really going to, as a universal society, ever accept anime in the same way as Japan does.
Well, it's our historical backgrounds and culture that's really going to determine this, and safe to say, American culture hasn't exactly had the best relationship with a contoured, let alone naked body. The United States comes from a long Puritan lineage of prudence. Only until this century was sex ed even discussed in classrooms, and even in the modern day, it's an awkward position for most of us to talk about the naked body without any embarrassing sexual undertones. That is where the US and Japan differ so heavily. Japan, being a more Shinto and Buddhist-oriented country, doesn't necessarily see sex or sexuality, and especially nudity, as a concept that's nearly as condemnable. Granted, there is little to no public discussion about sexuality, and the community will still keep adult content out of the hands of children, but passively, Japan recognizes that human sexuality is a part of everyday life, and is something that needs to be catered to.
Right? The countless love hotels that dot Japan cities are evident of that. And these facilities are not only respectable and sanitary, but in many cases are elegant and gorgeous. A great atmosphere for a couple to get together for very specific activities. On the flip side, though, the closest thing you're gonna come to that in the States is a dirty rent-an-hour hotel.
But there's something more to Japan's view on the naked body that no one really has been talking about all that much, yet is essential to understand why they and the anime culture that's birthed from them is so accepting of nudity. This is done through a concept called Hadaka no Tsukiai, or naked friendship. Now, on the surface to a Westerner, this might sound fishy, but speaking as a Westerner who had adopted Japanese life, I completely understand. When two people bathe in the same area, nothing is hidden. Expensive suits, watches, the cultural armor, so to speak, is literally taken off and you're forced to just be you. This in turn creates an atmosphere that everyone is on the same level, what they were born with, and thus, when you converse with people and even befriend them, you do so on a level that has no barrier to entry. In the dozens of times that I've been to public baths in Japan, it's never been weird. If anything, it's been strangely uplifting. I remember at Uedo Onsen Monogatari, there was a super cold bath that a bunch of Japanese guys my age were trying to hold out for as long as possible. Seeing an opportunity to break the barrier between Nihonjin and Gaijin, I nakedly dipped into that icy cold water while chanting, "Dekiru kemo, dekiru kemo, dekiru kemo," or basically, I think I can do it, I think I can do it, I think I can do it. In the end, I felt like I was able to break that wall of Tatemae because we were laughing like idiots together. But what made the scenario all the more meaningful was not only the fact that we were sharing this trial together, but we were doing so with nothing to hide behind. No expensive clothes, no in-fashions, just us. I understand that a lot of people still may not see it the same way that I can, but I promise you, in a country where everyone seems to have their guard up, when they finally let that guard down around you, it's a chance to really get to know someone without the social pressures of appearance. No one's gonna stare at your junk. This is coming from a guy who was the only gaijin in a bathhouse of 30 or more Japanese dudes at one time. And from what Aki tells me, the same can be said about the ladies. Everyone is just there to relax, but instead of being cautious or even ashamed of how they look, they see it as a way to level the playing field when spending time with family and friends. It just boils down to culture. When I tell people that I unironically enjoy games like Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash, they look at me like I'm crazy. To them, they see a game that's hypersexualizing females for post-pubescent teens that degenerates how men view women. But from Japan's perspective, I see a self-aware, goofy game with exaggerated girls whose obviously inhuman bodies act as a punchline. And I think there's plenty of folks who consider themselves a part of the anime community that can understand that. Over there, an overly exaggerated anime character can and is oftentimes the butt of several kinds of jokes, which mostly come from the fact that these characters are so exaggerated that the very concept of them is hilarious. Again, I know a lot of folks in the West may never be able to see that perspective, but for you naysayers, let me put it this way. Why is bodily humor so funny and acceptable in the West? Why is farting, burping, pooping, and even barfing, which theoretically we should see as inappropriate behavior, so funny in animated kids shows? I would argue that the same reasoning applies to Japan's take on sexual humor. It's not meant to demean, harm, or even make people uncomfortable. It's just a source of culturally specific comedy. Farts are funny in Western juvenile entertainment. That's just the way it is. Where in Japan, sexual humor is just something that's culturally understood and normalized. And this is why I fear that anime which uses that sexual humor in countless series might never hit the Western mainstream when it comes to traditional media. But I don't think that's where we have to define mainstream. As people become more and more adept to the internet, they become more and more exposed to concepts that before were only unique to certain cultures, and as that exposure grows, it starts getting adopted by more and more cultures. As far as anime culture goes online, I think we've gotten to a point where a lot of us have a better understanding of how Japan's sexual humor works. It's not meant to hurt anyone, and it certainly isn't meant to act as a bar when it comes to normalizing women. It's dumb, it's exaggerated, but it's funny because it's dumb and exaggerated, just like the West take on bodily humor. I won't lie in saying that anime and anime games don't take advantage of fan service in order to sell because, let's be honest guys, they do. But I don't think all over-sexualization of characters is fan service. Sometimes I think it's just done for the lulz, but nevertheless, until more people can see anime and the anime community from that perspective, I don't think it'll ever hit IRL mainstream appeal. But it doesn't have to. It may just end up being another popular internet concept, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But thanks for watching, everyone. Another big thanks to Xseed and Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash for sponsoring this video. If you like colorful third-person shooters with bouncy anime girls, give this game a shot. It's surprisingly fun, both on and offline, and while I don't have a PSVR, I can only imagine how insane this game could get with that kind of experience. But if you'd like to hear my take on other similar social commentary about anime and gaming, I've done countless videos alone, and even some with a few AniTuber guests like Akideris and Joey the Anime Man. But don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all of my newest videos, and until next time everyone, this is Gaijin Goomba, signing out.